Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Andrew Eborn Show. Hope you're doing well. Well, today I'm joined by my old chum, the wonderful Paul Gordon. How are you, Paul?
I'm very good, Andrew, and it's nice to see you looking so bewhiskered.
Did you know? But you know why I am bewhiskered?
Because are you bewhiskered, bothered, and bewildered?
Well, I would. It's always a thrill. Every time of this time of the year, I get participate in something called Movember. Now, Movember is really, really important. It's all to do with raising money and awareness for mental health. And it started off as a men's thing about sort of mental, physical health, because people wouldn't talk about things such as testicular cancer and so on and so forth. And it became very, very important. So this is my 10th year. What you have to do is you grow your moustache, you let your facial hair grow, really difficult. No climbing mountains, no treks through the desert. You basically don't shave. So that's all you do. But you raise money and awareness. And I've done it for 10 years now. And already it's over thousands, literally thousands of pounds through people's generosity. And they can go along to Movember and you get the great and the good talking about issues, which is really, really important. As you know, it's something that you and I have spoken about ad nauseum, but really, really important. And Movember is that 1 month when they put a little spotlight on it as well and sort of say, look, we can do things and we can help people. And that's why I think it's really important.
It is important. And I of course, I know about Movember, but I thought maybe you hadn't shaved because you couldn't afford a new Philips shaver or, you know.
Well, Philip is my shaver, and at the moment he's been furloughed, so he has to stay at home. We'll be having none of him coming in here with his lava.
You're old, Philip.
Good old Philip. Speaking of Philip, have you been watching The Queen?
I have. I've not only have I been watching it, I've watched the whole lot. I've now finished all four. Do you mean the Crown?
Yeah, well, yes, no. Well, there's two things. I try to combine two stories in one because you have the Queen. It's all to do with the royal family. You've got the Queen's Gambit, which is to do with your chess, which is brilliant. And then you've got the royal family. Absolutely, you've got that whole sort of thing, which is superb with Olivia Colman, and there's a Maggie Thatcher in there. There's a Prince Philip, and like, they all vaguely look like them somewhere. And I thought it's great. What do you think?
Well, I haven't watched the Queen's Gambit because apart from anything else, I'm not a fan of chess, so I thought I'd give that one a miss. But the Crown, I thought the first series was best with Claire Foy. I thought that was fantastic. I think Olivia Colman is very good, but she's about 12 inches too tall. So when she towers over Maggie Thatcher, who was very small herself, it's a bit weird. But I think it's a fantastic series. I love the whole lot, and presumably they'll be knocking out a fifth one very soon.
Hey. That's what I love is this wonderful controversy, because the producer sort of turns around and says, well, look, it's not supposed to be a documentary. So when the Buckingham Palace say, look, we don't really like it, we don't really like the portrayal of this person and that person, it doesn't really happen like that. The producers can turn around and say, well, it's not supposed to, a bit of artistic license. And you think, well, really?
Well, I mean, a lot of it, you think to yourself, like the Michael Fagan intrusion into the palace, which only the Queen knows about. So the conversation is obviously what they assumed he might have been talking about. So when they backtracked his story to losing his wife and his job and this, that, and the other, you think to yourself, well, there's a lot of artistic license there and the other private conversations. But, the things that we do know, which are public knowledge, I mean, when they tie it all together, it makes for a darned good yarn, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And this is and it's that wonderful obsession with being voyeuristic. And we have to sort of turn around. We want to peek beneath the kimono and see what's going on in the royal family and so on and so forth. And this is fact is stranger than fiction now, isn't it?
Well, when you and I were young, I mean,
young?
The only thing
were you young?
Do you remember that far back, Andrew?
No, but I remember yesterday. It's got to be good. Yeah,
I'm going that way as well. But I remember. I mean, it used to be Princess Anne who'd fallen off a horse, and then Prince Charles's. What was that in 1969? I've actually got here. Funny as we speak about it, right here I can show you.
Oh, look at you!
When he was 21, what do they call it? The not the inauguration. His
investiture.
That's it. And these are the this was a collector's item that my parents bought me back in '69.
Ah.
And I happen to have them on my shelf for some reason. So it's fortuitous that you mentioned that. And together with that, I have here a Churchill crown.
Oh, look at you showing off. It's almost as though we planned it, which we didn't. I love it.
I didn't plan it, no. You mentioned about, you mentioned about, so when we were young, we had the excitement of all that, which was actually pretty mundane. And then suddenly in 1981, you got all this malarkey with Diana joining the firm and all the glitz and glory of the wedding, and then the downfall, and then the revelations. And I watched that interview again the other day, the one that she did with Andrew dubbing with
Martin Bashir.
Martin Bashir. I watched that again the other day, and I don't think it's as riveting as they all make out myself.
Oh, well, it's not necessarily the riveting stuff. It's so beautifully staged. When you shine the spotlight of history back on that, and you think, well, hang about, this is what I'll do. I'll do all the little elements. And you know, one of my passions is media manipulation. And I think whatever side of the things you were, the way that you can play the media to know exactly what you've got to do. And it's that revelation behind it. But there's also a story behind the story, as there always is, about how they entrapped Diana into giving that interview. And so there's a bit of Martin Bashiring going on at the moment, because they're trying to hunt him down to find out, did he fabricate these bank statements and extraordinary things like that. And it's that story behind the story which is interesting.
Yes, and conveniently, he's not so well at the moment, although he has been seen out and about.
Well, he has. Yeah, he's been out and about shopping. So you're well in. And that's what people said. And I heard people defending him on the news today, and every day they sort of turn around and say, "Well, he's got to eat." Well, at least sort of turn around. If you can eat, you can tweet, is what I say.
But do you remember back in the 80s? I'm trying to remember the guy's name. There was a famous guy who ended up. He'd embezzled something in his company, and he ended up in Ford prison.
Yes.
And in Ford prison, he got Alzheimer's disease. And so because he'd got Alzheimer's disease, they let him out. And when they let him out, he recovered from Alzheimer's disease.
Good. It was good that did he go back in again?
No, he didn't. He got away with that one. No. So it's, sometimes these people, when they suddenly, like Bashir, who suddenly has gone awfully quiet all of a sudden.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because I talk to a lot of people on this show about the best way of handling these things. And when you're found out, I mean, it's all about media manipulation. It's all about brand preservation and brand recovery and what you have to do in crisis control and stuff like that. And everybody says, get out there, admit the mistake as early as possible, because then you control the narrative. It's rather like that they sort of say the Bill Clinton effect, if you like. Sometimes you exaggerate the problem, so that when the revelation comes, it's not nearly as bad. And people sort of forgive you. They sort of, oh, well, actually, it's not that bad, you know. It's always the lie and the cover-up that gets you. It's the same. I quoted Clinton, and we met, and I met both of the people in the party. I met Monica, extraordinary circumstances. I met Bill as well. They both had interesting stories to tell. But the reality was, it wasn't the affair or anything. It was the lie and the cover-up that got him, wasn't it?
Well, of course. I mean, it always is, isn't it? Because as soon as you have a lie or a potential lie, you have all the wonderful stories that go around it, and then you eventually end up with conspiracy theories. So, which is why whatever happened to Kennedy, whatever happened to Marilyn Monroe, all those things, and 9/11, there's now documentary after documentary after documentary about all those three subjects.
Yeah. And it's always the way, and I've had people on here as well. We had Nick Pope, who worked for the Ministry of Defence for 22 years, and 3 years of those, he was on the UFO desk, and he was in charge of working out, every time there's a sighting, it would end up on his desk, and he would have to go through a little checklist about, well, hang about, are there weather balloons in the air, are there this or anything else? And 95% of the time, he could say, okay, it was identified flying object. But in that 5%, there was a little area where they didn't know. And it's always that sort of matter where you sort of, there's that glorious thing. I don't know if you're a fan of the X-Files, but Fox Mulder has a poster in the back saying, I want to believe. I want to believe. So you're always looking for evidence. He tells me in all his time at the Ministry of Defence that he never found anything to confirm that there was little aliens that come down and scoop people up and get autopsied by Spiros Malaris. They all he never found any of that. But what he did say is that it was open, and that's why the conspiracy theorists want to fill in the gap.
Yeah, I mean, but also as an aside, by the way, X-Files, The Crown. What's the link there?
Go on, then, go for it.
You must know.
No, I want you to. This is a big build-up. It's like you can't do a knock joke and not let you have the punchline.
Here's the punchline: X-Files and The Crown. The Crown actress who plays Maggie Thatcher is what's her name from X-Files?
Yeah, she is exactly Scully. Scully. I know the answer. I didn't know you were doing like a quiz. I want a prize if you're going to do it as a quiz. I thought this was you do your wonderful link, and you don't run in there and tell the joke, you know. But the other thing, you mustn't dismiss, which I know you've done, you mustn't dismiss the Queen's Gambit, because that is a brilliant, and it's not just about chess. It's all about empowerment. It's all about coping with addiction. It's all about pressure and society. It is a glorious series. And with a man as intelligent as you are, I think you would love all of those elements. And the game of chess, and you know, we're a big fan, we get chess masters on here as well, talking about that. It just shows you, shine a spotlight on it. So we're going to be doing a series, we're doing more, we've got more chess masters coming on, because I guarantee that chess sets are going to go through the roof this Christmas. Another Andrew Eborn prediction. Little Johnny and little Jilly will be little child prodigies, and they're going to be sort of turning around, and they're going to say, hang about, that could be you. There's money in this game.
So the Queen's Gambit has been produced by Mattel or whatever it's called, or Waddington's Games. You know?
I hope so. I hope it's a sort of product endorsement thing, in the same way as Power Rangers was. You know, they gave away the series.
Yes,
and fantastic as it. And there's a chum of mine. It was Red Power Ranger. He's out there, and the great thing is he's still got the suit and he does that sort of thing. He's a wonderful stunt actor, but he goes out as Red. He calls himself Red Power Ranger, and he's a lovely chap. But what's happened is that series was given away, so you make all your money on the merchandise.
Well, the thing about this product placement malarkey, I can remember there's a documentary somewhere years ago where they talks about obvious product placement. And there's a thing like this guy's he's on his phone like this.
Yes.
And he says, okay, darling, I'll see you tonight. We'll go out for dinner and so on and so forth. And he says, hang on, I got to check something. He turns this way and he puts the camera close to so they can see Samsung sort of written across the phone.
Yeah.
He says, hang on a moment, I'll just make a note using my Sharpie. You know, and I love that kind of stuff where it's so badly done.
Well, and there are glorious moments in history where you will have, and if you've ever been on set of these major movies where you're getting millions of dollars involved for how much screen time you're getting for your particular vehicle or your beverage of choice or that sort of stuff. And without, we talk about Bond movies and stuff like that, without that sponsorship, product endorsement money, a lot of the times they wouldn't get made.
Well, absolutely. I mean, every time a Bond opens his laptop, you can see the Apple logo or the Dell logo, whatever it may be.
I was glad to hear that it's working, this endorsement, and people instantly think of Bond and the right product. And that was all. You've got no idea what laptop he used. You've just ruined a multi-million-dollar business. You, Paul Gordon, you've messed the whole thing up. You know, that's the reason the Bond movie's been cancelled, because people like you come on and you've got no idea what he drinks. You've got no idea what he drives. You've got no idea what sort of laptop. You've got no idea what the watch.
Well, you know, I'm the least susceptible person to advertising, because as soon as the adverts come off, I turn off anyway. And I always think back to, you know, again, when we were young, I don't think it's just an ageist thing, but every advert that was on TV in the days in the 60s and 70s, you could hum, you know, a finger of fudge is just enough to give the kids a treat. Every single one you knew. These days, they have a car driving through the mountains, and this car revs around the mountains, and and at the end of it, it's an advert for shampoo.
I know, it's great. I know, but that's what you want. You want the adverts which are memorable. You know, the ones that, and actually that's what they say. They say,
are they?
you
I
don't have to be loved.
They're awful.
No, but that's okay. If people remember them and they remember the product, that's what you want. So shake and vac, you know, put the freshness back. That was, look at you.
I'm a secret
jazz
lemonade
hands.
drinker. Our whites.
And see, that's what you want. Our whites lemonade. You want that sort of stuff. You want the flake advert.
The flake advert did wonders for me when I was 13.
Hey, it's got. I mean, absolutely, and that's what you want. You want those glorious moments, and some of the most creative. And I've got a lot with the advertising industry. Some of the most creative minds, they have budgets which are the size of movie budgets to produce these 30-second bits to capture the imagination. And done well, they are masterpieces, aren't they?
Well, they are. But I mean, I like to think that I'd rather know the product they're selling. I think if it was done in a more of a jokey fashion, as opposed to these very serious dark ones. Everything these days is dark. It's like the movies. Have you noticed movies since 2000? And I've worked this out. Since about 2002, they've drained the color out of movies so that everything looks orangey brown, sepia. And it's like everything's dark and gloomy, and the adverts are dark and gloomy. There's no frothy lightness. There's no joy. And if you look at any movie prior to 1992, especially ones from, say, the 90s, the colors are vivid, it's sharp, it's bright, and the same with the adverts. So it's like we've all turned a weird shade of kind of copper and gold, you know.
Talking of copper and gold and media manipulation, my famous person turning orange. And I'll tell you what, look at you with your segue. That has to be the worst segue ever, but I quite like it. And I've got to say this, though, because I like balance. You know me, I always want to put the other side of any argument. And I talk about media manipulation. He is the poster boy for media manipulation. He is the poster boy for my wonderful friend Alison Jackson, the BAFTA award-winning artist. And if you haven't seen her work, she basically depicts what we would imagine, or we rather hope, happens behind closed doors. And she does this with surprisingly accurate lookalikes, and she'll capture that moment. So she'll have a queen on the loo, for example. She'll have the queen going down the betting shop. She'll have Will and Harry partying in Las Vegas. She'll have all sorts of glorious things. And Trump is her poster boy. And then we've worked with her a lot on those sort of things. But I feel a bit sorry for him at the moment, because everywhere, and nobody's going to like this, but I'll say it anyway, everywhere but everywhere, people are saying, it's terrible. He's the worst ever. And even on the news, and they'll cut him off and do that sort of stuff. The way to do things is to balance the arguments. So if you were to balance the arguments, he would turn around and spin the PR. No president, no sitting president in history, in the whole of history, has had as many votes as Trump got in the last election, with or without allegations of fraud and all the glorious stuff that's going and being alleged. So if you're spinning that, but nobody reports it that way, why is that?
Well, it's a little bit like my thoughts up with Brexit, for instance, where loads of Remainers saying, you know, nobody wants Brexit. And I just reminded them that 17 million people, which is almost half of the vote, did want Brexit. So whether you like it or not, most people, a very large percentage, although it was a narrow margin, wanted Brexit. And same with Donald Trump. An awful lot of people voted for him. So he must have done something right, or whatever he said. But also his ratings didn't drop, did they? I mean, he's not my kind of person at all. But
I'd say this is not a political statement at all. It doesn't matter. It's balancing it. That's the whole idea.
We had a conversation. You and I had a conversation a while ago, and I remember saying to you, which a lot of people misread. But
I love it when that happens. It's gonna.
So do I. I get that all the time. I tell you that. But you know, I'm a big fan of watching great speakers. Whether they are good or bad people is indifferent to me. I just want to see how they do it. And of course, one of the greatest speakers of all time who could rally people was the biggest monster of all time, Adolf
Absolutely.
Hitler.
Absolutely.
And so I take away all his politics and his dreadful views and this, that, and the other. He rallied people. Now, those people don't have to be rallied, do they? And it's the same with Donald Trump. He said, this is what I'm going to do. This is my feelings. This is my opinion, blah, 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 blah. And the masses, the big masses, in fact, more people voted for him than actually live in this country, don't they?
Oh, no, absolutely. And a huge amount, I mean, huge amounts. It was the biggest turnout in history, turnout in history, and the biggest vote of any sitting president ever. And, and I think, and I predicted it yet again in my second edition of the Andrew Eborn Book of Failure, available from all good bookshops and a few not so good ones as well. Rush down to Amazon now in the second edition with a wonderful foreword by my chum Mike Reed. But in that, I predicted exactly on a state-by-state basis what the vote would be. And I timed it beautifully. It's all in there, all in black and white. You can see it in the copy. I timed it beautifully for the bet with the eventual winner, or I say eventual winner, the winner as of today's date, because the odds on Biden winning right at the very beginning were tiny. You would make nothing. You put 100 quid down, you get 50p profit.
Yeah.
What I predicted, and exactly what happened, is people underestimated the popularity of Trump. They just assumed it was going to be a walkover in the same way as they assumed that it's been a walkover of Hillary. The mistake that they made is that they asked people how they would vote. And pollsters always do that. And people know that if you have an unpopular view, you shouldn't really tell people. So my theory is that when you ask people how you're going to vote, well, are you going to vote in or out for the hokey cokey or for Brexit, for devolution or whatever? They're always going to say, well, hang about, is it popular? Should I just not state my view? Or should I state what's a perceived popular view? Yeah. So people would not admit to voting for Trump or supporting him. And therefore the pollsters got it wrong again. And so the odds on Biden were ridiculous. You're going to win. It's ridiculous. You get no money at all. I timed it perfectly because I knew eventually they'd catch up and realize that there was actually a swell and it's going to be neck and neck, and too close to call will be the narrative for a long time. And so I managed, it's all out there, I've got the money. I managed to get odds of 9-4 on Biden. So not bad. And I timed it exactly right at that exact moment. And I cashed in early because I thought they'd be going on forever. They won't declare it otherwise. So I managed to get that thing. And I did predict it was going to be Biden by Don. That's what I said. I wrote the headline as well. It's got to be good. And Sleepy Joe, as I also wrote, Sleepy Joe will wake up America. But I have, as I say, the press side, which is more my sort of focus rather than the politics, the way that the press continue to just show one side of it. They're all saying, oh, he's lost and he's done this and Trump's an idiot and all that sort of stuff, as opposed to trying to look at some of the things, because the economy actually ain't so bad in certain places.
That's right. And I, probably like you, I've got a lot of American friends, and a lot of them speak very eloquently about the situation in similar tones that you do. It's an interesting situation because when you have the big pantomime baddie.
Oh no, you don't.
But everybody loves to hate, or everybody just hates anyway, and this, that, and the other. I just find the whole thing absolutely fascinating, and it's why. My wife, bless her, she said, why do you sit up all night watching this? And every election in America and every election in this country, I'm one of the people that I get my coffee and biscuits and surround myself in my little comfort zone in my armchair, and I'm glued to the television for the whole process. And what I do is, probably like you, I have little bets. And I'm not boasting, but I often win these bets. Whether it be Biden, whether it be Trump, whether it be Boris or whoever it may be.
No, there's a massive difference between you and me on that one, because you say, I often win these bets. I always win these bets. I won bets on Brexit. I won bets on Trump and Clinton. I won bets on Biden again, this time at great odds. I won bets on the election when they said it was the hardest election to call. And the reason is this, Paul, is that history repeats itself. but we never learn the lessons of history. If you
Yeah.
look back at human behavior, and you and I are both members of the glorious Magic Circle, and you're all sorts of red badges to match our eyes, and we work on the basis that part of magic is predicting human behavior. It's what Derren Brown says. You know, he won't say he's a magician, he says a bit of psychology, and say there's all sorts of understanding. And it's right, he's right. He's right. You work on the basis that if you understand human nature, you'll be able to be a much better performer, but also be able to predict the future. And part of the secret is looking at that sort of side. And they follow patterns. And it's like the master manipulator as well, talking about that. This has been a week for all of those comings and goings. What a master is he? That guy, no, I know it's not a political statement, but how glorious was that Christmas image with that wonderful lips? So it was like an episode of Friends, wasn't it? He came out with his box. And you know, there are many ways of getting out of Downing Street. I can tell you, because I've tried all of them to get in. But there's back ways and there's tunnels and you go out there and everything else. The most glorious way when all the press is there is when you're beautifully backlit and you've got this box. You know you're going to dominate the headlines. He's a wise cookie, that Cummings.
He's a smart boy, isn't he? And it's funny how so many people seem to miss the point. But these things aren't lost on me. And I think it's why when I talk about, as an entertainer, about performing, if you have all these skills or knowledges or interests, this, that, and the other, they make you a better performer because you see lots of things that lots of people don't see, which gives you sort of skills in communication, doesn't it? Now, I'm going off at a tangent, which I'm sure you would agree here. Magic Circle, they had an unlocked event, haven't they?
Well, I was going to bring you on to absolutely. It's not a tangent at all. It's a nice segue, which is why I mentioned it. I drip fed it, so there's a nice little hook there. It was sensational, wasn't it?
It was wonderful and a fantastic job.
I think it's still going on. I think it's days and days and days. They started.
Crikey, it was 5 hours, I think. So
5 hours. That was only the first half.
It was longer than your average Ken Dodd show. But the thing I enjoyed mostly was the part with David Williamson talking about how when he performs, and I have a lot of something in common with David Williamson here, that he doesn't know where he's going. He just kind of wings it and gets on with entertaining people and interacting with people. And however it pans out, that's how it pans out. So when he says he's never really had an act, I've always felt that as well. I've never had an act per se. So it kind of, the fact that he said it kind of slightly validated my feelings about it.
You're absolutely right on that. And but there's nothing as good as a well-rehearsed ad lib. So when you do watch David, and we've seen that sort of side, and you know where he's going to go on certain things. But what I love, it's about performing in the moment, isn't it? And and you quoted, and I don't think you realise this, but you quoted that wonderful episode and posted up online about Motormouth.
Motormouth, which
and his performance on Motormouth.
Yeah, and then you surprised me with your connection.
No, you see, little did you know. Well, welcome now live on the line. No, I shouldn't do that. We did that to you last time. No, but it's true. For many years, all the seasons, like last things, I went down to TVS's studios in Maidstone, and I was the warm-up act for Motormouth and a number of series. I did Finders Keepers. I did Hail and Pace, if you remember them. I did some of the blind dates. I did Give Us a Clue. I did some of the Best of Magic. All that. When I was a baby barrister, rather than washing dishes in Italian restaurants, I used to warm up TV shows, sometimes even on screen. And there's all that sort of glorious stuff out there. So Motormouth was brilliant. But just as Marvin Burglar said, he used to book the magic acts and promote his wonderful set, product placement. And you worked on the sort of basis that all the magicians there. So I was there when David Burglas came into the studio and did his wonderful things with his wonderful memory acts on these kids. And it was glorious.
That.
Yeah, I thank you. And I was there when David Williamson came out with Rocky the Raccoon and scarred these 4 and 5-year-olds to life as he whacked it on the table. I mean, I was there. They're still in therapy, these kids. I was there, and it was a glorious moment. And what I loved about it, there's a real sense of community, and it's much like doing a live show. And I've always preferred any entertainment because what I used to find is that the live shows would just flow by. You'd get in nice and early in the morning. They had a fantastic canteen at TBS. And because I was a youngster and I used to like my food, I still love my food. They used to have the fantastic big breakfast. You have half a farmyard, which would just be put on your plate. And we would eat our way through this. And I would stagger into the studio and whip this audience into a frenzy, ready for the live show. And then straight after the live show, we went off and had parties and stuff like that. When we used to film the Christmas shows, the specials, which always happened in July, because that's the way it works, magic of television, it always used to know, because you knew that you could go back and do it again, it was never as edgy and actually took an eternity to do.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm a huge fan of live television, and when things go pear-shaped, it's just part of the charm of it. And it's the trouble with over-rehearsed, over-produced stuff. It looks over-rehearsed and it looks over-produced, and it's why back in the I don't know, late 70s, whenever it was, Tiswas used to be on.
Chris Tarrant and lovely Sally James and many others.
Oh, Sally James. And
Carol G's and Spit the Dog. See what I did? They're fantastic.
And who was the magician who was an old pal of mine?
It was an old pal of yours. Go on then.
Clive Webb.
Clive Webb, look at
Clive Webb, the zany Clive Webb. And it was glorious, because as a I don't know, I was probably quite old then. I was probably like 17, 18 when that came on. But I used to be glued to it, because it was just being live TV. It was so refreshing from the stuff that later came on that looked kind of really too rehearsed. That thing with Andy Peters, I can't remember what it was called now. It just looked a bit too.
Well, the great thing about it is that, and that you and I are the same on this, we love that anarchic sense of television, and Tiswas was anarchic. I love the idea. I also warmed up a show with Neil Buchanan called Finders Keepers, and the basic idea that the set and Pat Sharp, who's a mate as well, had a similar sort of thing with his show Funhouse. And you basically, in Finders Keepers, it was a big set, same shot down at TBS again, and they showed all the different rooms, and Neil would be there who'd read out a clue, and kids basically had to wreck this room looking for whatever the item was. And the great thing, it was brilliant television. I used to love it. They're fantastic time. But there were questions in the House of Commons about it, because kids would emulate it at home. So they would play this, and people's houses got wrecked. It was glorious.
It was probably Mary Whitehouse got involved in that one.
Oh, but we love it. And it's that sort of moment, in the same way as the reason that punk works so well, is that people want the antithesis. Is what I'm saying is that I love the alternative view. Doesn't mean I agree with it. It means is that it balances it, and actually and you and I are the same. We always look for that sort of the dark element, the sort of sense of humor and the absurd and the tragic. And we epitomize it with that sort of comedy and tragedy mask, When there's tragedy, find the comedy. When there's comedy, find the tragedy. And within all of that juxtaposition is so beautiful, isn't it?
Well, when it comes to like magic shows, a lot of people, they love the Paul Daniels shows and so on, and I quite like them. But I always preferred Stuff the White Rabbit, because it had a feeling, and I know it wasn't, it was all clipped together from segments, but it had that wonderful nightclub feeling of a magic show going on. Whereas the Paul Daniels show, just to me, it just, it was so well rehearsed with the introductions and the this, that, and the other, and when something is like that, I'm just begging for something mad to happen, and it never did, and it reminded me. I was telling my wife the other day, I can remember on a live TV show, I think it was probably something like Children in Need, and the girl with a microphone is going around the public asking them questions, and she's obviously got a time slot going on, and you can tell that the producer's telling her to get on with it. And she goes up to this woman, she says, and how are you today? And she says, well, I would be wonderful, but I've just had some tragic news that my son has died in a car crash. And the presenter, not thinking, says, oh, wonderful, 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 and goes to the next woman, which is, it should be sad And it obviously was sad for this poor woman, but it was incredibly funny because...
Oh no, and hilarious, because you do want that moment, and it's taking those glorious moments. Speaking of which, hold that thought. Stay there just 10 seconds. Hello.
Hello.
The reason I went back is because talking of reminding bizarre and glorious things, children need, and you mentioned children need, I didn't know you were going to mention it, but it's they raise 38 million, brilliant, absolutely brilliant in the current climate when people are struggling and so on and so forth. To continue raising money for all these causes is wonderful. You wouldn't know this either, but I was one of the presenters on Children in Need 30 years ago, when I was -7, and I got a letter. Here we go. This is from the BBC in my scrapbook. There you go. You can see the sort of shiny. But I'll read it to you. But it's a glorious letter. Here we go. Dear Andrew, at last a letter from those dreadful people at Children in Need in Elstree. This is to confirm that we're expecting you on the evening of the 23rd of November to do your thing and entertain the crowds and viewers. We'd like you to be here at 6 p.m. to be ready to do your first act on Newsroom Southeast at 6:50. That first bit would be to introduce yourself and levitate Lloyd Grossman, about 40 seconds in all. As I explained to you on the phone, we can't give you exact times, but we'd like to use you in most of the opt-ins and opt-outs and could give you some idea of the sort of things you'll have to work with, even if we can't tell you the order. There'll be a Glenn Miller orchestra, so perhaps you could work out a bit of involving musicians, say 30 seconds. Peter Dean, who was a Big EastEnders chap on his barra, you remember him, will be on the veg stall. We thought you could cut off his head. And perhaps work vegetables into one of your pieces. 30 seconds for each. Then there's the ciggy trick. In the days you could do tricks with cigarettes. On Guy's jacket, this was the main presenter at that sort of stage. 30 seconds again. An act involving any kids that turn up. About 40 seconds. And last but not least, cutting someone in half. Again, about 40 seconds. We'd also like to think of you as one of our fail-safes. And if all hell breaks loose, we need something to go to. We're Shriek and you'll fill. I loved it. And that was from the BBC. And that was glorious. And so I was, and there's a video out there somewhere, I was presenting on BBC Children in Need. But I loved it because it was exactly, that is like the best letter ever. We chop them up, saw them in half, shove a cigarette in, do this, do that. And we're just asking you to film Big Illusion, disappear the Statue of Liberty, and now here's Budsy. I love it. And I'll tell you, it was one of my most favourite nights because I was up there in Elstree and there was a whole galaxy of stars. And the atmosphere there was just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And we talk about live and the energy and so on and so forth. We get that. And I was just reminded of that because I suddenly realized the time has flown by. But it was 30 years. Can you believe 30 years since I did that? And I haven't aged at all. It's always
you're looking younger by the moment.
It's always a thrill. Well, listen, it's an absolute delight catching up with you. We have
Connor.
Oh, yes. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. He deserves his own little special 5-minute moment. So you're going to drip feed that because in the next thrilling episode, when I get the wonderful Paul Gordon back, he's going to talk about his memories of Des O'Connor. But for now, Paul Gordon, thank you for being my guest.
Thank you, Andrew. It's lovely to see you.
Bye-bye.